Welcome back to Reading with Miss Nickerson. Today we're going to read the next story in the 5-minute Marvel stories called Mixed Signals from Knowhere. On Knowhere, Drax was lost in his thoughts. He turned into one of the depots and didn't even notice the supply clerk smiling at him. "What's got you down?" the clerk asked. Drax jumped, surprised. The supply clerk looked ridiculous. She was almost lost among a clutter of recycled machinery, wires, and space gadgets. She seemed to be wearing some of it, too. I am not down," Drax replied. "You are the one who is down. You are very short." "Ha, you're funny," she said. "I'm Kaz, by the way." "Kaz," Drax repeated. "That is a silly name. I am Drax." She laughed again, and this time Drax smiled. "Drax, that's a cool name," Kaz said. "Are you from Knowhere?" Drax suddenly remembered he had somewhere to be. "I should be going." Kaz nodded, and Drax saw the look of disappointment in her eyes. Without thinking, he continued. "Do you want to come with me?" Kaz smiled. "Sure." Drax led her back to the Milano, enjoying the way she laughed at everything he said. The other Guardians were surprised when Drax introduced his new friend. "I am Groot," Groot said, extending his branch to Kaz. Rocket smirked. "Maybe she can help me with one of my gadgets." "Nice to meet you," Gamora said simply. Star-Lord was not as friendly. "Not suspicious at all," he muttered to himself. "It's not like we have mystery people trying to sneak onto our ship here." Just then, the emergency distress signal started to beep. Star-Lord rushed over to the communication console, where Rocket was already intercepting the message. "It's coming from right here on Knowhere," Rocket relayed. "Well, is it somewhere or nowhere?" Drax asked. "It's somewhere on Knowhere," Gamora interjected. The look on Kaz's face turned to alarm. Star-Lord narrowed his eyes at her. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about this, would you?" he said. Just then, a huge blast shook the Milano. It knocked the Guardians and Kaz off their feet. Outside, burning embers and smoke still billowed from the blast. Star-Lord led the Guardians to go investigate. Star-Lord looked up to see Iron Man, one of Earth's mighty Avengers. "Oh good," Star-Lord said. "Reinforcements." "I don't think he's here to help," Gamora said as Iron Man turned and fired a huge blast at a building. "He's attacking." "I am Groot," Groot said. "I know, pal. He may be a good guy," Rocket replied. "Right now, he's on a rampage." "Please do something," Kaz cried. "This is my home." "Hold on," Star-Lord said as the Guardians ramped up for battle. "We have to try to take him down without hurting him." "Agreed," Gamora said. "This isn't right. Iron Man wouldn't do something like this." "Somebody should tell him that," Rocket yelled, as he and Groot jumped out of the way of a blast. Suddenly a voice rang out overhead. "Need a hand?" The Guardians looked up to see Thor, the mighty Avenger. "Wow, maybe I'm telepathic," Rocket said, looking up at Thor in wonder. "Or maybe I was on a mission to Xander and heard the same distress signal you did," Thor replied. "Speaking of which," Star-Lord said as he fired a blast at Iron Man, who easily maneuvered out of the way. "A little help, please." "Ah, yes," Thor said, focusing his attention on Iron Man. "This is highly unusual behavior." "Well, what are you waiting for?" Rocket yelled, growing impatient with Thor's lack of urgency. "You'll see," Thor said. "In 3, 2, now!" At that moment, a green blur jumped out from a building behind Iron Man and slammed into the rampaging Avenger, knocking him to the ground. "Hulk smash!" "I believe you know Hulk," Thor said, landing on the ground where Hulk now had Iron Man pinned. "I am Groot," Groot said. "You're one to talk," Rocket replied. "You look pretty weird yourself." Gamora nodded at Thor and Hulk. "Thanks for the assist, but what's gotten into Iron Man?" "What's your plan here, huh?" Star-Lord said to Kaz, accusingly. "Is this some sort of big distraction?" Kaz was shocked. I don't know what you're talking about." "Cut the act, sister," Star-Lord replied. "You're obviously behind this in some way." Drax stepped in front of Kaz defensively. "What are you implying?" he asked Star-Lord. "This is no coincidence," Star-Lord said. "Your girlfriend is totally evil." Friends?" Thor said as he put his hand to his ear. He was receiving an urgent call through his communicator. "It's Tony Stark." "But if you're talking to Tony Stark, then who's that?" Gamora asked, pointing at the Iron Man suit on the ground. "Only one way to find out," Star-Lord said, bending down to open Iron Man's helmet to find there was no one inside. The suit is empty, but it looks like his arc reactor has been tampered with. "Let me see it," Rocket said, examining the blinking gadget. I've seen these before. It's an ordinary tracking device. You can get them anywhere. Gamora looked at Star-Lord, who was flustered. I believe you owe Kaz an apology. Star-Lord turned to Drax and Kaz. Look, I'm sorry about earlier, he said. I shouldn't have rushed to judgment. It's okay, Kaz said with a smile. We understand, Drax replied with a shrug. You were just jealous. Star-Lord groaned. I am not jealous. The end.